Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session on rural and regional waste management. My name's Christine Blanchard. I'm the Manager of Waste Services at Lockyer Valley Regional Council, a small regional council in southeast Queensland. Moving right into the presentations today, our first presentation is on moving waste, expectations versus economic realities for remote local governments. And Deepika Mathur is a Senior Research Fellow at Darwin University. I won't read out the presenter bios. They are in the app if you need them, so I'll hand over to Deepika.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where we are meeting and also the traditional owners of the land where I come, the Aranda people. And because this research is set in West Arnhem region of the Northern Territory, I would like to thank the traditional owners of that wonderful land who allowed us on their land and country. And we hope that this research actually helps and then protect the ancient land and sea country on which they live. And I'm just going to, I always struggle with this, so perfect. So I'm not going to talk about what circular economy is. I'm assuming everybody's had an overdose of that, but just making a mention that this became a national directive through the National Waste Policy, and then it became incumbent on the local governments to follow this through. And I come from the Northern Territory, and they took out their version of circular economy strategy last year. And so the change, of course, it's a shift from the take, make, use, and dispose approach to shift to how can we keep resources in circulation for longer. And while there are heaps of examples which are celebrated from cities, there is far less information on what is happening in regional towns of Australia. Did it change? No. So this project we did, me and a colleague from Darwin University. We were asked by West Arnhem Regional Council if we can review their current waste management practices and if we can suggest some ways forward. And their intention was that whatever our findings would be, that it could be shared with other remote and very remote councils. And already I can see that the themes that I'm going to talk about have been discussed in the keynote and the last session that I was at. So this particular presentation is just like a starting point for discussion. And of course, the suggestions or the conclusion that we came from our research are no means definitive and the only ones. All right, so this map shows all of Arnhem Land. If I just showed West Arnhem, it would be really a very tiny dot. So this is east and west. And our research areas were 5 wards in West Arnhem Regional Council. Kakadu, Maningrida, Gunbalanya, Minjalang, and Warui. And the way that we conducted this research was that we had interviews with the staff, like waste managers and the landfill operators, and to recyclers, freight companies, barge company, road transport. And so what I'm going to talk today is just 3 high-level findings that we got from this particular research. And the details are in a report which is online, and I'm sure everybody can access that. So the first one, again, we had this in the keynote, it's about collaboration. And of course, for any kind of meaningful participation in circular economy, there needs to be collaboration between the various stakeholders. And what is happening in Australia that the emphasis on responsibility of waste is still on local governments. So what we are proposing is that you need to shift from waste management to waste governance. And the difference being there that waste management, you put the responsibility on various levels of government, territory, local, national. But when we talk about governance, waste governance, then even the non-state actors have to take a bit of responsibility. And that is important because there are so many stakeholders that need to be part of implementing circular economy. It can't just be the local government. And that is why we are asking that several stakeholders who are involved in collecting, transporting, recycling, all of their interests have to be aligned for us to be able to deliver to a circular economy model. Just to give you an example, that just within West Arnhem, heaps and heaps, and these are not all of them, who are involved. Some of them are cross jurisdictions, so it becomes even more difficult at different levels. How do you coordinate them? And of course, collaboration is a key component. And during our interviews, what we found that there was mention of all these organizations, but nobody really knew how they're all going to work together, or where do they sit in the larger process, in the waste recovery process, and how they are connected, what values do they share, and do they even buy into the concept of circular economy, because not everybody is as committed or not committed in the same degree. Okay, again, it is, like I said, it is linked to the collaborative relationship, because people might have different ideas of what they want to do. Like if it's a barge company, their primary objective is to move materials from A to B. It's not doing reverse logistics for waste. Or if it's a transport company, they might be carrying certain goods to these communities. Again, reverse logistics might not fit into it. Recyclers based in Darwin are not really interested in getting waste or trying to find ways of getting waste from these very remote communities. So how do we align things so that their interest and priorities all become part of this circular economy project? And of course, we have to start early, because if you don't reach consensus, then there is a lot of mismatch, as we found in our projects. So we can see that, of course, this is again has been discussed earlier today. We can't start at the end of the circle, right at recycling. We do have to start at the beginning. And two of the big waste streams that we were told are in these communities was packaging waste and construction waste. And when we tried to get any kind of numbers on waste volumes, there was no packaging waste anywhere, because it had all been put in the trenches and burnt. So it's one of these things that there's no evidence. If I say that it's one of the biggest waste streams, well, I can't prove it. But the point being that the stakeholders that are responsible for producing this large amount of waste on the communities, apart from the community members, there are stores and there are other organizations. If we don't start talking to them fairly early, we don't start talking to the design of packaging that comes into the communities. So if they have to start at the beginning and not just try and find how this waste will be recycled right at the end, which you have to do too, because that waste can be packaged and perhaps sent to Darwin. I mean, because I'm talking about West Arnhem, I'm talking about taking it to Darwin. And again, with construction waste, that is a huge problem again. And what is happening in that is that, again, we are leaving it to the building contractors and we are asking them to close the loop. Whereas the waste that is generated can be addressed more effectively if we start at the beginning, at the design stage. Are the architects being asked to design so that there is less waste? Do the tenders and the contract asked that this is a priority? Do they ask what are the waste management strategies for the building contractors? And is there any action that's taken if it is not carried out? And what we found is, again, that in these areas that the council expectation and the contractors' expectations were completely different. So the council wanted the building contractors to take the waste out of the land, or out of the communities, whereas the builders would rather just pay for that waste and put it in the local landfill. And especially if there were materials that were not used, they were more than likely to say, how about you keep this and you can put it in use? And like one of the staff members says that the biggest issue is that there is no avenue for them to take anything off the island. This is from one of the islands. Contractors would come and say, oh, we've got excess stuff. We're just going to leave it with you, which sounds really great. You've got some extra steel and you can use it for projects, but the long-term effect, no one uses it. So it's just stored. So then we have excess stored legacy waste. So you're actually just increasing the waste burden of the remote councils without solving the problem. And then again, another group of stakeholders, the product stewardship administrators, are funding recycling initiatives. But little thought is given to funding how this is going to be collected from these very, very remote communities and brought to a recycling place. So essentially, the main message being that we have to get all these people in line and try to get their values and commitment to circular economy. Which leads us to the second point, is that this is all about material circular economy, but material flows are global and they are dependent on the global commodity markets. And there is no easy pathways for materials from remote regions to get to national or global recycling centers. So the first step that these communities have is to get it from from the communities to, did it change? Okay, to the communities to Darwin and then or to certain reprocessing centers. So you can see it's a one-way flow in the communities that we looked at. So you have materials coming, online ordering has increased it, so you can have it through barge, you can have it through road transport, there are drop-offs through small charter planes, but what happens after that? Very little leaves the communities. So the waste management staff are segregating the recyclables, but they are not clear about what is the next step. How do we connect materials to recycling? And this whole process is quite expensive and very unclear. And so you can see these diligently sorted materials at landfills. You can look at what the small volumes are. Anybody who's working in these remote councils would know about the small volumes. So how do they get them from those remote communities? What is the profit? What is the incentive for them to take it from there to a place where they will be reprocessed, considering the huge transport cost and the processing costs involved in these? Just another example how things get moved through barge. So while circular economy is a great objective, completely supported, but it just does not incorporate the realities of transport logistic requirements from these areas. Policies that are designed for cities are just not in sync with the realities in these regions. And the movement of just the equipment, even if you have to bale, even if you have to consolidate this waste, if that equipment has to go on a barge to an island and then compact and then take it back, it is just enormous logistics. And so there just can't be an expectation that local governments will be able to participate in local economy, circular economy without having a different approach. So, and there is a sense of disappointment or being let down by the staff who work in these areas. Like one of them said, for an island, you're dependent on the barges. And if the barges don't cooperate, and the people on the other end, which mean implying recyclers, are not that invested in sending their person to collect or to have this association, why would they bother about an island? Who bothers about an island? So you can see that there is a sense of being let down and not being able to participate in this global discussion on circular economy. So what happens if they do want to take part? So they'll have to first send it from West Arnhem to, let's say, Darwin, and then all the reprocessing centers being thousands of kilometers away. And because the current models are on consolidation of waste and economies of scale, so they are more prevalent in areas where there are large population, large waste volumes. There is government involvement and funding of these waste management activities. Of course, New South Wales is one of the largest. Victoria follows that. So number of businesses, large population, all of them contribute to this industry. And of course, in contrast, you can see Northern Territory, Tasmania, and ACT just have 3% of the industry enterprises, and this mostly because of their small population. So this made us ask that, do we have to have the same model of recycling as is in other large cities, which is centralized, or do we need to look at models that promote small-scale recycling, or do we need more research in that field? Because currently it is all recycling at scale. And the last point I'm going to talk about is, again, a different business model. Should there be a different economic model that actually, or do we need to create and deliver and capture economic value while simultaneously contributing to environmental and social aspects? And this is kind of important because, as you know, that regional councils, remote councils have the way that it's funded, that you have very little rate base, and the rest of it comes from government grants. Just for an example, for the past 5 years, West Arnhem Regional Council annual income, 52% was from grants and just 22% by rates, whereas Darwin, which is a larger city, the annual income from rates is 88% and only 7% from grants. And this constricts the local governments on how they allocate that money because each grant is tied in with a certain objective. I'm rushing through. Don't want to be taking too much time. And of course, the federal government says that there are so many grants. Why can they not take advantage of that? Most of the grants ask for co-contribution, which is hard if you don't have any rate base. Sometimes they're not the lead organizations. NAIF is one that is a loan, so do they have the ability to pay back? And product stewardships, which seem to be the most apt solutions, are just not working for the region. So maybe we have a different product stewardship scheme for the regions, which actually take into account what's happening, because all the product stewardship, which are about oil, tires, paints, all these materials are still in the landfill and they're not being moved anywhere. And very quickly, and the cost for them, for each material, they have to have containers to store them. They have to have transport cost, reprocessing cost, and I mean, it's just a mess. This just shows the complexity of moving materials out of these regions. I'm not going to go into details. And just to conclude, the three things that our research shows is, of course, collaboration. So can we align the values? Can we make sure that everybody does want to participate in circular economy? Can we look at connecting the cost? How do we fund these? Do we need to be centralized? Can we fund decentralized models? And how can we find grants and support for transporting waste out of these communities? Because that is far more important for them than any other things. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepika. That was very interesting. And having done some work with the Torres Strait Islands in a previous life, you didn't even get into quarantine issues around moving your waste. So there's a heap of challenges up there. We'll hold questions of the speakers until the end, and we'll do them all together. Moving on to our next speaker, who's Andrea Baldwin, who's a team leader resource recovery with Albury City Council, and she's going to be talking on exploring soft plastics recycling options for regional and rural businesses. Please welcome Andrea.
Okay, good afternoon everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and share a pilot program that we've been working on over the last, say, year and a half. We did receive some money through the Circulate Industrial Ecology Grant Program back in 2021, and that has enabled us to run a business soft plastics program, particularly in the Albury area, as part of that funding that we did receive. What we wanted to do was to see if we could have a business soft plastics trial or some sort of program in our region that we could eventually spread out to further councils outside or around New South Wales or southern New South Wales. The funding that we did receive was to the value of about $37,000, and that really was to support any bin infrastructure and also just the truck collection that we wanted to do as part of the trial. The trial was going to be for 12 months. Just because it was at a COVID time, we did extend that through till about February this year, which we were lucky just to get that extension. We did make this trial free to all businesses as well, just during the trial period, and we'll talk about some of the results post the trial as well. Our aim was to reach, just in that pilot program, 26 tonnes of material to be recycled, which is actually quite a lot of soft plastic when you consider it. And again, I just want to reiterate, we just really did want to work with businesses and in particular the retail sector. To do any sort of trial program, you do need to have a partner. So we're lucky that in Albury, we have a partner called Plastic Forest. I'm sure that a lot of you actually know David Hodge. He's the founder of that business. And so he is located in Albury and was happy to partner with us as part of the trial project. He likes to turn all that product back into 100% recycled content, so we're just fortunate to have that local recycler in our region. So what was going to be accepted under the pilot program? We only wanted clear and coloured soft plastic. So we're quite clear about that. We were focusing on the retail sector, so we looked at your Harvey Normans and those sorts of businesses that had that clear plastic. And we were quite specific about what we needed to participate in the program. Again, just referring to, say, Red Cycle, we weren't after any plastics that might also be part of that program. We were looking at a thicker content plastic. So working with our businesses, we had a very ambitious coordinator, Ashley, who's now actually moved on from the program, but she has moved up north here somewhere. She did a lot of door knocking to try and engage with these businesses and get buy-in. We were able to secure about 21 businesses overall who wanted to participate in the trial. When we first started out, what we wanted to do was find those businesses that would have the available storage in their back end to cater for infrastructure and also allow trucks to come and do a collection. But during the pilot, we found that we needed to find another option because we were inundated by businesses who also wanted to participate, but the budget really didn't allow us to have more than what we had already committed. So if we do have a look at those options that we did consider for the businesses, we ended up finding that one option was the back of house, so where we could have the truck there and collect using bin infrastructure, and the other one ended up being out at the Albury Waste Management Centre. So that's what we progressed as part of the trial. So once we were able to engage with some of these businesses and get a little bit of commitment from them, Ashley did undertake a lot of face-to-face education with the businesses. She needed to teach them about landfill diversion. She needed to teach them about the types of plastics that were suitable under the program. They needed to know a little bit about circular economy because the businesses were really not aware of that fully. And she needed to teach them about contamination and the effect of their contamination if they placed that in the infrastructure at the back of house. She did monthly visits to all the businesses that were involved, and she also did bin assessments regularly to make sure that their product was clean. And it was a time of COVID, so there was obviously a transition of staff happening at that time and lack of resources. So a lot of issues were occurring, but we were able to just, work with our partners to achieve good outcomes anyway. What we also found is that once they were onboarded, we offered them, we needed to put some commitments in place. So they were all put under agreements, particularly with the recycler and also and the business themselves, just to make sure that we had consistency and commitment throughout the term of the project. Council did promote all of the businesses as well. We just used Council's normal channels and mediums to communicate to our community what local business were doing in this space. And you'll just find, just through that process alone, we had a lot of additional businesses calling Council wanting to participate. And that's where we needed to find that alternative, which I'll talk about a little bit more shortly. So the alternative was, because we had 21 businesses wanting to do a back of house option and a lot of other businesses who wanted to participate in the trial, we had to set something up at the Albury Waste Management Centre. So we had a cage set up out there where just normal businesses could come in and actually drop off their soft plastic. Understandably, this was managed by a council managed facility and required our staff to then take that plastic out of that cage, put it into another bag, and then place it into a skip bin as well before it was transferred off-site. So it really did become a bit more of a council-managed project, but this is where we got all of our tonnage. It was about 18 tonnes came in over that 12-month period just through businesses doing drop-offs that they collected at the back of their house. What we did find is that this probably provided the most contamination. So there was about 15% contamination with the drop-off material, and it's probably because those businesses didn't really get that one-on-one education that the businesses that had the back of end house collection point. So that really was the difference in that we found. So what were some of the challenges to do with dropping it at the Waste Management Centre? Obviously, it became something that the staff had to remove all the contamination for, so that was one of the challenges. You do need to have the resources to accommodate a service like this. So it was never part of the pilot program initially, but it did become probably pretty much the answer in the end. And just coordinating that off-site delivery to the recycler was always something that we had to consider the timing, because often they weren't ready to have the product delivered, or we needed to remove the skip because we didn't have the space. So that did become a little bit of a challenge for us. It is an easy way to collect soft plastics though, by asking the business to bring it to the Waste Management Centre. And we were resourced to remove the contaminants, which is always a positive. And maybe in the future there's a better way, and perhaps consider baling as an option to that as well. Okay, so our other option was really to have an end of house or back of house option for bin collections. This worked really well. It did actually require a lot more recruitment to get the businesses first off, and you had to make sure that the businesses really had that storage option available and access for trucks. We did work with JJ Richards. They were our partner as part of the program, and they were able to provide just a lot of range of different bin options for the customers as needed. We also trialled some steel frames and liners to go in there, and you'll even see that there's a yellow lidded bin there, which caused a bit of issue. You'll find where you see a yellow lidded bin, you're going to have other recyclables join the program, unfortunately. So we had to refer to putting locks on bins as well, and making sure that staff only had access to that. We found that the contamination through this method was around less than 5%. And then in having a look at it even further, we found that this contamination was due to the truck probably hadn't fully emptied its loads before it was doing a soft plastic run. So most of the contamination was already in the truck before it even picked this up, which actually says that this has probably got a better contamination rate than we realise, which is really positive. So over the 12 months with our 21 businesses, they were able to recover just over 9 tonnes of soft plastic material, which was pretty clean and pretty amazing. And they were offered a different range of size bins to accommodate their needs. So some of the challenges that we had with this section. So the recruitment of businesses. I know Ashley worked really hard. It was COVID times. She did a lot of door knocking. So just to even get 21 businesses was a really big effort, and it did take up a lot of staff time and energy. Just trying to make sure when you've got a range of businesses that are small, medium, large, they all want different collection schedules. So we needed to make sure that we only made it once or twice a month, and we just made the companies have to stick to that regime. Making sure that there's obviously storage areas for bins to be placed is something that was always difficult to work with, because a lot of businesses just don't have that space out the back to accommodate another bin. And just the infrastructure costs. We found that to even purchase some of the bin infrastructure that we needed for this pilot program was quite a costly exercise. Education is always going to be a key item and something that needs to be consistently delivered. So throughout the program, we were delivering flyers, we were providing them their social media posts. We were using a lot of different mediums to make sure that message was going to the staff and also to our community on what was going on. Our learning out of this was we really did need face-to-face engagement with these businesses. It was the best outcome for us to do that. They all thought it was great because there was no fee for the 12 months to manage their soft plastics. And the collection frequency is also something that was a little bit of an issue depending on the size of the business. And as I just mentioned before, locks on receptacles is something that's really important and necessary. So what's our outcome from this? You'll find, since the program has finished in February, we no longer offer a service at the business to actually do a collection there themselves. We have continued to be a collection point at the Albury Waste Management Centre. And what we have also done is place a fee on the recyclable material of $60 a tonne. So we'll continue to collect that material. We're actually transporting it still to plastic forests who are happy to accept that. And what we've also found with this type of thing, in just checking recently about the results of this, a lot of the businesses have gone back to the way that they were. So they no longer have a soft plastic recycling collection at their premise. They've just ended up putting it back into the waste stream. The more medium and small size businesses, are actually still taking their product to the Waste Management Centre. So that's what we found as a bit of a result. So when we talk about where to from here and what does happen, we are in a large regional area. I'm one of 13 councils in southern New South Wales. We're very much in an agricultural and manufacturing precinct. There is a lot of soft plastics in our region. What we face down south is the transport and logistical issues, which is quite obvious. We don't have the infrastructure and we don't have the resourcing to manage projects that are like this as well. So a few concerns there for us. If there was a product stewardship program in place, that would be amazing. I do understand Dairy Australia and Drummuster are also looking at some options around this type of waste material. So that's a definite option for us looking into the future. The other thing we did mention to our businesses was to, engage with their waste providers, and a couple of them have continued to be provided a service. A lot of the time the soft plastics gets included in the cardboard run, and that's been the only other option that we've been able to provide these businesses. So just in finality, just as feedback, many of the businesses loved the service. Obviously they would, it was for free. And we found that, some of those businesses have continued to have a service and some have opted to go back to their habits prior to COVID and put it back into the general waste. So a fairly mixed bag. When we have a look at the cost of this as well, it's probably around $1,200 a tonne to recycle plastic if we use the grant money that we were given, but that doesn't include any of the labour that our coordinator was putting towards the project as well. It was a bit of a reality check for businesses on really highlighting how much soft plastics that they do generate in their businesses. And we all know that we're still not purchasing recycled content as well, so it really did highlight that. And we will continue to do a little bit more post-survey work just to see where we go from here. But at this stage, it was a great trial. We had some great engagement, but the end result has not really given us a way forward, unfortunately. So that is what it is with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. She didn't even get to her little tap on the glass. She did well. Have we got James? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Our next presenter is James O'Keefe. He's the Director of Back to Home program for the Department of Planning and Environment in New South Wales. Yes, in New South Wales. He's going to be talking to you on the Roads to Home program and collaborating with Aboriginal communities. Please welcome James.
Afternoon all. It's great to be here on Gumbaynggirr country, and I just want to acknowledge our elders past and present. And today I'm just going to give you just a bit of an idea of what Roads to Home is and how the department's delivering that in Aboriginal communities. What is Roads to Home? It's a program being delivered since 2019, and it's focused on the 61 discrete Aboriginal communities in New South Wales. So they are the former missions and reserves. They're relatively remote areas, but there are some along on the east coast, and I'll just take you through that. And the program is focused on household collection, postal delivery, emergency vehicles and community transport. A lot of these communities, because they're not subdivided and they're just on one lot, it's an issue because they don't have addresses, so they can't get telecommunications, they can't get NBN, and a lot of the time the waste services don't come into these communities. And it's also about delivering some health and wellbeing for our communities and the social impact that has on the community itself. It's also providing opportunity to subdivide. These are just large lots, and it gives the opportunity for the community, if they wish to decide, and to dedicate those road assets to the local council. So we work with local council and to ensure that through the DA process that they can have the option to dedicate. So the Roads to Home program is focused on just the road itself, the easement. So we're looking at stormwater and wastewater, curb and guttering, and also footpaths. So a lot of the time, even prams, you see everyone pushing prams along the street. So it's improving that safety. Street lighting, a lot of these communities don't have lights, so it's very dark, and just improve that safety, and also upgrading any road surfaces and telecommunications and power. So we upgrade the assets to the local council standard. We're currently in 34 of the 61 discrete Aboriginal communities around the state. And we started in 2019, and we've completed 6 of these communities, and we're seeking funding to bring on the other 27 of the communities that we're not currently in. This is an example of this is out at Colenabri, the Wali it's called. Very remote. It's the roads are dirt. There's very little when it rains. The floodwaters come through, and it inundates the community. That causes issues. So it's about upgrading these assets to council standards. So what you see in town, everyone has that equal opportunity. Big part of Roads to Home is sitting down with the community and doing that stakeholder engagement piece, where you're sitting down with the elders, you're having community stakeholder engagement barbecues, and giving the community information. And the program pays for the planning and assessment phase and the DA process, walking with the community. We're not here government telling them what to do. We're here to tell them give them options to, if they choose to decide through a land dealing under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, that they choose, it's their decision, and they choose for the program to come into their communities. So it's at this point in time, $140 million program we've invested, the government's committed to, and DPE, Department of Planning, we provide 100% of the funding into a dedicated Roads to Home account in the local Aboriginal Land Council, so they're fully responsible and accountable for their funding, and we walk with them to choose those contractors. As we're going through the process, we're out in the community, we're hitting a lot of asbestos contamination in these communities. A lot of the housing was built out of asbestos materials. So we've spent about $15 million in these communities just cleaning up removal and remediation of this asbestos contamination. So we work with the EPA, has been really excellent, working with the local councils to reduce those waste levies at the council landfills. and seeking opportunities to build that across the state. Just to give you an idea, so this is out at 3 ways. So one option is we just upgrade the road easement. So if the community wish to decide we can just upgrade, that's option 1. Option 2, they're just not, because they're only just on one lot, they can actually subdivide the land, and we can put in fencing, and that also, then they have addresses, then they can get bin collection, and we work through that process. And then option 3, just down here, we can see that they've actually, this is the option that they've chosen, that they've created 10 new lots, which gives them opportunity for housing into the future. Some of the activities, so we're working, a lot of these communities that don't have bin collection at the moment, we work with them to educate them on recycling, and we work with the EPA and local councils and RTOs to assist in that process. We get members from the community, so we train them with, for instance, like asbestos courses, and they do emu picks, and they work in the communities with the intent to also get engaged by the contractors to do that and get that community involvement and employment. We come up with signage, so signage that's in their language. We've found that there's a lot of illegal dumping out there as well, so that's been really useful and a good deterrent, and getting that pride back in the community, reducing that illegal dumping and that cost there. We partner with RTOs and TAFEs to do the training, so civil construction works, traffic management, and that waste recycling component. So we partner with them. We have sign-up days, and it's all about getting them into the community, having a barbecue and just having a yarn about what those opportunities are. And we have been successful in Bowra. There's been 5 people that's gone through the program, got employment. 2 people got employment with the local contractor and also in the local council. So we're seeing there's benefits in the community. As I said, we TAFE go into these communities and provide that training and support for the community. And then this is just a picture of where you're seeing just the pride, giving them a fluoro shirt with their name and a badge on them. It just brings pride into their community. So yeah, the roads to home, if you think about roads to home, we're outside of the fence boundaries. So, sorry, I'll put it down. So we work with a lot of recycling with the construction material. We try and reuse as much as we can. We have cultural heritage liaison officers whenever we're digging in the communities, just to ensure that. Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. Just here we have a member from the community that's always there whenever we're digging, just to ensure that we are culturally significant and it just doesn't stop the work. So we can do it. We can assess the artefact, and they have that cultural heritage component. And a big part of our program is celebrating the events, and so we have a good celebration. Ministers come out, and I'll just show you. The next slide's a video of down at Cabarita, down at Foster. So I'll just.
This community has been sort of a community within a community. We're in the centre of town, and the town is built around our Aboriginal community. And we sometimes feel isolated, and the work that is being done by Roads to Home has made a big difference.
Part of our role is to walk with mob. walk with those elders that have walked that land. They got put on a lot of these missions. It wasn't by choice, but they've certainly grown up there. They feel a sense of pride and belonging, and it's because they've lived there.
You can think of Roads to Home as, just this program that puts a bit of bitumen down in communities, but it's much more than that. If you've got access into a community, school buses can get in and pick up kids to go to school. Ambulances can come in, when the mob gets sick, to be able to easily find them and get access into their homes. Just rubbish collection from local government. All of these services that struggle or refuse to come into our communities will be able to now, because there's decent roads, we're dealing with stormwater, putting in street lighting so at night it's easy to get around. All of these things will make such a big difference to other services that come in and support these communities, but also our mob will get access to services that they haven't seen for a long time, and I think that's really important.
Now our roads are done. The kids have got a footpath where they can walk along safely, and it's all done up to standards, over and above. I think they've done such a good job, Ayers Construction, that the community appreciate everything they've done.
The fact that we are seeing a lot of our mob gain employment, and a lot of the project managers are saying that they'll look to keep them on, particularly at the end of Roads to Home, and the fact that we've got Aboriginal people who are gaining employment, gaining new skills that they would never have had. We've got TAFE on board providing that training. So there's a long-term benefit here from an economic perspective for our communities through employment.
Oh, I'm following. If they want me, I'm following. Yeah, it does drive the kids to do something, once they grow up, and if they get to see more of the uncles and aunties do it, they just learn more about what goes on with what we're doing and that.
You can't anticipate what it actually does for a community. It lifts the community. I love seeing programs like this because it's not just for the 12 participants that went through the program, it's for an entire community.
It's really about saying your community is as important as these other fellows over the other side of the road. Your homes and your community and your streets are just as important. And we want people to be proud of where they live, because they have this intrinsic pride for where they live and where they come from. But that just helps them to actually blossom more. So that's what it's about, is sitting down with the community. What does this look like to you? What is the end product? What's your vision? What does this look like at the end of the day? And it might not all be Roads to Home. There's other government agencies that are involved with us as well, and other parts of the department who are helping out as well. So it's really a very holistic piece. We've still got a long way to go. We've only a few in, and we're learning at each step as well. So it's really great to come and see that a community is taking control. They've done the work in partnership with Roads to Home, but also with the construction company, and actually delivered this fantastic result. And you can see the pride in the community.
Yeah, so just a bit of a recap. The program is really about Aboriginal people having equal living standards in these communities. Some people don't realise that these discrete Aboriginal communities exist, and it's really about giving them opportunities and giving them a sense of pride and belonging for where they are. Communities need to be valued and recognised. So that's that piece where we sit down with them. We form a yarning circle. We're in their community, and we listen and we learn from what they're telling us and adapt that program to the community's needs. They need a genuine voice in decision making. This is out at our collie. It's a burial ground, a cemetery out there. It's one of the most beautiful places, and I encourage you to go out there, because it's owned and managed by the local Aboriginal Land Council out there, and just a beautiful, if you can think of a cemetery as beautiful, this place is really spiritual and really a sense of pride for the community. And then communities that are entitled to a genuine partnership with government. So this program is local government, state government and federal government and working in combination with the community and also the contractors and consultants that are all part of the program. So thank you, and I'll hand back.
Thanks, James. You guys are on a roll, not even going close to your 20 minutes. Our last speaker is Danette McLean, the Principal for Circular Economy with Oricon, and she's going to talk to us today on legacy waste tyres in rural and regional areas. Please welcome Danette.
Good afternoon, everyone. That graveyard shift. We're all still in that lull after lunch, looking forward to afternoon tea. So everyone up? So I'd say to my daughter, shake out your sillies. Let's get through the last session. Tyres. I've spent the last probably 25 years of my career in Cape York, Torres Strait and northwest Queensland. But for some reason in the last year, a couple of projects have coalesced and tyres has become a really big topic for out there. So I've kind of mashed together a couple of projects to talk about some of the issues that rural and regional communities are having with tyres. And I can't see Anne. Oh, she is there. Shout out to Anne Prince and also Liam O'Keefe, who have worked with me on a couple of these projects for their help there. All the errors and omissions in the presentation are mine alone, though. There we go. Okay. There really is no suitable disposable method for tyres in regional and remote areas. People are putting them just in landfills, they're stockpiling them. They all want to do better, but they really don't know how and they don't have any options. There are a lot of risks, particularly for local government out there. These stockpiles run the risk of catching fire. They harbour vermin, mosquitoes, pool water, and it's just not a great use of their space. There's a lot of end uses out there in theory, but our communities are finding that they don't really work for them. So what are their real options? Now what this really presentation is just a collection of stockpile tyres around the country, which I've added to my collection of landfills that mysteriously caught on fire just before I arrived on site. So there is a tyre stewardship program out there, and I believe TSA might be speaking in one of the other rooms right now. It might work well in cities, it doesn't work for regional areas. 25 cents of a tyre goes to TSA to help out. None of that is coming back to rural or regional areas. They don't have any facilities to collect the tyres. So everyone's just stockpiling them. Oh, I think I've gone through some of that. TSA has done a business case last year that did identify that there's enough volume to put in some sort of tyre processing centre in North Queensland. Now, I don't know how many of you have been there. That's a very big area. Even if we get a facility, there's still a long, long way for most of our communities to get there. The area that I'm particularly talking about, and we saw the top of Australia just in one of the earlier sessions, we're just a bit further over to the east here. The area based on Mount Isa is one of our projects, and Cape York area as well. So there's at least one mine in the area that I'm aware of has a stockpile of their own of 20,000 tonnes of tyres. Plenty of other mines out there with potentially similar volumes. Local landfills, 400 tonnes each, possibly. Just in this area alone, there's 27 landfills just in northwest Queensland right now. And Cape York and Far North have another 20 odd at least. So, you know, that's potentially 40,000 tonnes of tyres that we're talking about, legacy, just sitting around. There are also some private facilities, who knows, they're actually taking money to take the tyre. Yes, we'll recycle it, and then they're just stockpiling them as well. And they're being added to every day. And just for some comparison, about 70,000 tonnes a year get recycled in southeast Queensland. Most of these councils have no cost recovery on waste at all. Most of the landfills are unsupervised. You just go in, put your stuff wherever you like and leave. So tyres are buried or stockpiled. Occasionally someone might come out and say, yes, we'll take them all for you, but that's very rare and ad hoc. And they really have little incentive to improve. And the logistics are prohibitive. Mount Isa to southeast Queensland is 1,800 k's alone. And part of the year you can't access it for floods. Other areas are even more remote and are often only accessible by barge. Mines as well, a lot of mines out there, they also stockpile or bury. They have those very large tyres, OTRs. They're difficult to transport. You can fit 2 on a truck to bring back. And they also have very little incentive to improve at the moment. And what we're finding is it's being really left to the closure team. The mine's done, they want to come in and close it. What are we going to do with this big pile of tyres? So why do we want to do something different? It is a recoverable and valuable resource. We could reduce environmental harm if we can do something better, improve the visual amenity, and set an example to the community that they do actually care about environmental outcomes and get better custodianship of the land. Now, a shout out to this council, Carpentaria Shire Council, hell up there. They have neatly stacked every tyre in a row, and they have counted them all, which is fantastic for our purposes. We actually know what's there, but it shows that they actually do want to do better. Like, they want to do something. They're not just forgetting about this problem. They want to know what to do with it, but they just don't know how. Now, there's a lot of end-of-life options that you might hear about. Sounds amazing. Obviously, export overseas was a really big one. It's essentially not feasible anymore with the recent legislation changes. Crumbed rubber. Great product, but it's a long way from Mount Isa or Julia Creek to a crumbed rubber facility and to get it back to their roads. Tyre-derived fuels are, I believe in Queensland, particularly not yet approved, so great idea in theory, but once again, not yet a reality. The top one, I don't know how many people have been to a dairy farm. You've got to love using a tyre to hold your silage down. Still, you're probably not going to use 40,000 tonnes on silage. You can also use them in embankments and other kinds of things. But still, the volumes are fairly small, and that would be quite niche and specific in these areas. So we've recently worked with a mining company to talk about what their options are, and this equally applies to local governments and other entities. How do they get to what they are, to their preferred end-of-life option? We asked them, what would success look like? And what are the risks to doing this? And the where and how of how we're going to do this. So their big ticket items of the outcome had to be economically acceptable. As we've just heard, not a lot of money in rural communities. Even mines don't want to spend money on things that don't actually involve getting a product out of the ground. It needed to be technically feasible, legally compliant, safety and risk concerns, reputational risk. I do want to talk about that one a little bit more, and then also the environmental impact. So mines particularly not getting the best press lately, possibly well deserved. Starting to think a bit more about their social licence, and that is, if we just get them off their site, is that their job done? What if who you sell them to, what if where they go ends up causing another problem down the road? Does that come back to them, and how do they manage that? So yeah, Mr. Dodgy comes along and says, no worries, give me some money, I'll get rid of them. And then we find out that he's just dumped them further down the road. Or he's used them in a crumb rubber facility that hasn't made it to standard, and now those roads fall apart. That chain goes back to where did these tyres come from? And mines are particularly concerned about their reputational risk there. We're in Queensland, so this is just a bit of summary of all the legislation that they would also have to comply with. I won't go through that. Only those of us who bothered to do a law degree are at all interested. So we looked at some options and did a bit of an analysis of them. So our first option, of course, on any good business case, is business as usual. Do we actually have to do anything? Why can't we just leave them in the stockpile? It's certainly got a tick for economics, certainly got a tick for technically easy. We ran into the problem then about sort of legally, and once we hit that first cross, we didn't take it any further, but would obviously fall down on reputation and environmental outcomes as well. I'll go through we also looked at leased tyres. So this is obviously not an option if we're just talking about these legacy stockpiles, but mine's certainly looking at this circular economy option of products as a service. So we just lease some tyres and then they go back. No further involvement from the mining community. Certainly something mines are looking at for the future, but wasn't going to work here for our legacy stockpiles. And same with the long-term stewardship. You know, we need to get better with every new tyre that we purchase, but not going to help with the 40,000 tonnes we've currently got. So the ones that did make it through to our next assessment was contracted waste removal. Okay, so we pay someone, takes it away. Economically feasible, technically feasible, legally meets all of those requirements. A mine can also look at running it themselves. Should they process those tyres on their own site, turn them into crumb rubber themselves, turn them into tyre-derived fuels themselves on site? So that one certainly ticked all the boxes as a possibility. And then two other options there of the mine and an other operator joining together in some format, or where maybe the mine owns all the plant but they outsource the operation, or the plant and operation is still on the mine site but outsourced slightly differently. So those three went through and I'll discuss them a little bit further. This operator was also keen to look at would a traditional owner business work here. We actually discounted that one pretty early. I know everyone wants to do better in this space, but my question to them was, this is a really difficult problem that you can't solve yourself. Why would you give it to another entity and set them up to fail? That's not going to work in this space. Sort out your own issues first, and there may be a role for a traditional owner group as we progress. So yeah, the operations that were potentially feasible, the entity owned, entity outsourced plant and operation, or a contracted waste removal are the sort of four that we talked through. A couple of those are quite similar. Back to this question though that the mine continue to have is, who is responsible for the end use? When is it no longer my responsibility? If I just sell it to a contracted waste operator and they leave my site, am I done? Or if something happens to those tyres along the way, does that come back to me? And same with if you're operating it on the site with an external operator. Where is that line between who still owns this tyre? We did a bit of a flow chart then of all the steps that are involved in just taking it from that stockpile to the end product. So we like to think about, oh, there's a stockpile and there's an end product. Can't we just join them together? This is how many steps you have to consider in the process and who runs each step and where is the risk of each step. So first, if this is the mine, and local government could equally go through this process, but I'm fairly sure they'll end up at the same conclusion that we have, so they probably aren't going to go through this much process. They need to procure all the equipment and they need to assemble it. It probably needs a building, it needs connection to utilities. If it's on a mine site, it probably needs to meet all their criteria about safety as well. We need a workforce. Most miners are miners, most local government operators are doing other things. You need to find a workforce who actually just wants to shred tyres. You need to commission it. Then you actually need to find all the tyres. So most of them are in a stockpile. Someone kind of knows where most of them are, but not everyone. So we need to go and actually find them, bring them back. Depending on where they've been and how long they've been there, we need to wash them. We then need to de-aggregate them. So you think about your small car tyre, we've got to get rid of the metal rim and separate. The OTRs, it's quite a process to de-aggregate those. Then machines. I don't know, is it just me? They always break down when you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't have the part that you need. We need to keep these things maintained. We need to load those machines. Now, if you're talking OTRs, that's big machines that you need to drop them into the shredder. Even your smaller passenger tyres for a local government is quite an exercise. We load it, we shred it, then we've got to collect it at the end, and then we've got to prepare it for transport if we're going to do process it further later. That might be road, it could be sea freight. And we've already seen how quickly sea freight adds up. And then the main issue, if you're going to do it yourself, is you've got to find an off-taker. Who is actually going to take this and who's going to manage that process? That is a job and a half itself of who's going to run these things. And at each little point you can see those little circles, which you probably can't read very well. It's where our risk team has identified there is a risk here. We're going to build this great thing. Does it become a stranded asset once we've got rid of all of this stockpile? What if the tyres are in even worse condition than we thought? What if there's a safety incident while we're doing this? What if the road transporter suddenly costs twice as much as we thought? What if there is no off-taker at the end, or they now want us to pay them even more? So risks galore for the entity to run this themselves. So the easier option, still not without risks, is just contracted removal. So the more orangey colour here is what the local government or the mine would need to worry about. They need to locate the tyres and they need to get a contractor. Because the contractor needs to wash and clean the tyres, they move them to a central location, they've got to de-aggregate them, they've got to collect them and get them to their facility. So I'm not saying that this isn't without risk, but most of that risk, if you're a local government, is now being borne by someone else, and you can just pay that risk away. I don't have time to go into where we're going to find the funding to pay the risk away, but that is another issue. So for all of these projects, we're still kind of at this point of where do we go from here? We've identified the issue, we've identified some of the options. We're still really struggling with this end market. We're aware that there's some potential new facilities going in Townsville and Katherine, which will certainly help, but for most of these sites, Townsville and Katherine is still at least 1,000 kilometres away. And that's the closest they're ever going to get to a facility that they can use. They all know that the way they've been doing it is no longer acceptable, and they need to find these solutions for the legacy stockpiles, but also this ongoing. For quite some time, we're going to be still using tyres and they're going to be turning up in these stockpiles. Contracting out appears to be the most feasible. And the entities, the miners, the local government, they still want to know where that product ends up so that they're comfortable that they haven't just moved this problem onto someone else. Is that I got the hurry up? Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. You have to love the challenges of managing waste in the larger states, don't you? Yeah. The smaller states just don't get it. We actually have plenty of time for questions. Everybody has finished pretty early. So if the four speakers are up here, we have microphones. If anybody has a burning question, well, maybe not burning. That's probably not a good one. Yep, in the middle. Hang on. No, I think Linda's heading down the back first.
Thank you. This is a question for Danette. Thanks, Danette. Tammy Miller from Tyre Stewardship Australia. So I appreciate listening to you just then. I just wondered if you considered reverse logistics for the mining up in northern Queensland. Was that something that you looked at during your project?
In terms of bringing it just back hold.
When you're delivering a brand new tyre, did you consider the reverse logistics of bringing back the old tyre?
They're certainly looking at for the future, but as I said, I'm sure we know where we're talking about. Got at least 20,000 tonne in that stockpile to get rid of in the interim. So that won't help getting rid of that, but going forward, they're certainly trying to look at some better options so we don't end up in this situation again.
Hi, Giles Perryman from Master Waste Management. Given that you looked at it from like cradle to grave on the tyres, have you just got a ballpark dollar figure for an average car tyre to haul it out of remote Queensland and to market?
$900 a tonne.
Okay, and how many tyres is that? Is it going to cost more than it is to buy the tyre in the first place?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Hello, this is a question for Andrea. I understand that the outcome of that trial was that didn't provide any light on where to move forward. But after the 12 months, what are you feeling? What do you think should be the next step, even if the numbers do not bring you that answer straightforward? But what's your gut feeling that you should do? Or communities like Albury, that size, should be doing?
Thanks for the question, Sergio. I think our businesses should be participating in a soft plastics system at the back of house. And I think because we have a local plastic recycler who can accommodate them, it's a matter of changing the behaviours. So we found that very quickly some of the businesses were going back to bad habits pre-COVID and just didn't want to separate the material. I think it probably needs some stronger legislation or regulation around what they need to do to help enforce that, but we've definitely got opportunity locally to do that. So to be just trying to get those businesses on board. And sort of did affect mainly the larger corporations who generate a lot more material were the ones that didn't continue with the service, which was interesting.
The question is for you as well. Did you find that any of the businesses that partook in the trial actually bought the recycled content back?
Good question. We haven't actually asked that. So we are going to do some post-survey work, and that's something I can ask. But I think some of the businesses that participated, like Meat Pat for one, are in the sustainability game anyway. So I would say a few of them would be doing that, but I haven't got any confirmation or data to support it. Sorry.
I've just got a question for Andrea too. Did you consider just getting Plastic Forest to be the drop-off point?
No, we didn't. I think the preference was that it did go through some sort of decontamination process. If you looked at the businesses that participated, it was a less than 5% contamination, which is pretty amazing. And that contamination came down to, as I mentioned, the truck itself had contamination in there from the previous loads. So until, I suppose, that waste providers can provide a service where it's going to make sure that their truck is actually clean before they do a collection, that might be a bit difficult. In dealing with David, he didn't really want a direct collection. He just felt that he would end up being hit by all sorts of people. At least if we've got it out the Waste Management Centre, we can coordinate with him when we're going to deliver the skip a little bit more easily. He doesn't have huge amounts of available space there, and he just wants that coordinated a little bit better.
Sorry, Andrea, it's for you as well. Did you feel you got buy-in from other parts of council supporting the project by changing their procurement to increase recycled content?
Good question. I think any council will actually find that they're struggling with this whole purchasing of 100% recycled content. But what we did do is we had Plastic Forest come into our and talk to all of our leaders, and you'll find that a lot of our parks and gardens areas are actually all buying that product now. So that's actually been a really nice win as part of the pilot program, and a lot of our procurement processes have started to transition to ensuring that that comes into place. We've just gone out to a curbside collection contract as well, and we're looking for recycled content in new bins. So council are very much on board in supporting that 100% recycled content, which is positive.
Looks like that might be it. Oh, no, one down the front.
Question for maybe Deepika or Danette. Product stewardship was mentioned in both of your talks, and I'm wondering for regional and remote areas whether adding access and collection requirements within the scheme from scheme administrators is enough, or does it need a completely different model for regional and remote areas, in your opinion?
I think that is really interesting. I think first helping with collection, because all of these waste do need containers. Like some of the communities we went to said that they have oil and the containers are breaking and they don't have fund to buy new containers. So not only do you need help in finding, which looks very small in the larger picture of things, but these are extremely essential for these small local remote councils. So first containers, then transport, and just having a different model. And I think that we are so dependent on the way the cities work that you just sit, remote areas are just not considered what their issues are. So one good example was APCO actually came to the last local government waste symposium in Darwin, and they talked to all the remote councils and asked them what are the issues you're facing, and with individual council, because location makes a huge difference. So the solution for Alice Springs is not the same as West Arnhem. So each one of them will have different issues. So not one size fits all would be the answer. So that doesn't mean that you have 500 product stewardship schemes, but it does mean that can we at least identify 50 problems and then try and consolidate them and then address them rather than just ignore the whole lot. And I'll let Ned.
Oh, I think you pretty much covered it. Some of the work that we're recently doing, containers for change here in Queensland, many of those communities don't have that at all, because it's not viable for any operator to set up there. So yeah, I think it needs to be a completely different model for these places. The logistics and the economics that they're based on for cities just don't work when you get out to these places. And everyone there wants to do the right thing. Everyone wants to recycle. It just doesn't economically make sense for the volumes that they have out there.
Just for the online presentations.
That's all right. Sorry, one more for Danette. I was interested to hear you speak about mining companies wanting to focus or put thought towards their confidence that their waste is being appropriately managed and the downstream responsibilities that they have as a company. What sort of exposure do companies have to legal consequences from those sort of management or inappropriate engagements and failure to treat waste in line with regulations?
Look, I think if you are employing a licensed waste contractor, then legally you probably entered the gate, you're okay there. Certainly you don't have to read many newspapers to know that mining have done legally the right thing, and that has not helped their social licence one little bit. So they are starting to be much more aware that you can't just tick the box and say legally I did what I was supposed to do. They have to look further than that. What is the perception of this and what is the reality of just passing the buck to someone else? So yeah, legally I think probably they're fine, but we're all have moved on from just ticking that box.
Any more? Anne?
Anne Prince, really just a comment, and I'd really like the panel to sort of what their thoughts are. But having worked in the bush for decades, I think EPR is a complete and absolute failure in the bush. And you've only got to look at programs like e-waste. And, there's targets set in place. They get the target, they stop. And the target is much easier to get it from all the metro. It's cheaper and quicker to get it from the metro than to go anywhere bush. So until the Commonwealth, who sets the agenda for and the legislation for the EPR programs, I think until the local and state governments lobby the Commonwealth to change the way the EPR is set up, we will never have any change for the bush councils at all, who have got these all the same quantity, all the same types of waste, but in very small quantities, and they're just discarded, and then they just build up into legacies to the point then that the local councils can't manage it. So I really think the EPR, the way the EPR programs have been established, that's where the failure is, and until we address that failure, we just keep doing what we do now. So I just appreciate any comments from, that's just my personal opinion, but any comments from any of the panellists this afternoon and on how we change and break that cycle.
Well, I've still got the microphone, but I think Anne and I have stood at many landfills together and had this same thought. Yeah, we can't just keep doing it. The model doesn't work for out there. So someone's got to buy the bullet that these communities provide for the rest of us. Provide things that most of us don't want to live in Mount Isa, most of us don't want to go to Burketown, but they provide a service that we are going to have to subsidise in some way or other to make it work. Some figures Ed and I are running at the moment, we're running into the 50 millions to just clean up and bring to a basic level of service equal to what you would expect here. And that is a lot of money for a very small amount of people, but that's the reality if we think that we're still going to rely on these communities for our food and our fibre and our mining products. So, anyone else?
I think what Anne is saying is right. I mean, I don't have a solution yet, but it's something that we do need to look at very seriously, because you can see the regions are being left behind in the EPRs and the product stewardship schemes. Yeah, they can meet their targets without touching any of those remote communities, and they're all paying for those tires. It's not that they're not paying the levy, but they don't get any of the benefits for any of the EPR programs. So yes, I think it's a concerted effort has to be made, and unfortunately these are in the areas with very low population, low political clout. So I guess we have to empower, or others have to be the voice, or have at least join their voice to lobby for them. And maybe the other governments which don't suffer from this have to also. Most of the states do have bits and pieces and parts which have very remote communities. So it's in their benefit to be adding to that voice and making sure that we don't have regions that are not addressed in this.
Thank you. I think you've covered most of it. When we're based in Albury, logistically, we're well placed from a transport, and we do love those EPR schemes. But when I look at my regional area, which is 13 councils from Albury to Wentworth to the South Australian border, and then up near Broken Hill and across, it's something that's just so far out of their reach. It's not something that they can even consider. They don't even have recycling out there, and they don't have fees on their landfills or anything like that. So how are you ever going to compete? We've also got, I suppose, councils that are all cash strapped, and the culture there is not one of thinking about this type of aspect. They're more concerned about health and other issues in their region. So yeah, it's difficult. They do support, I think, larger regional areas, but when it comes to regional and rural communities, it's a real tough ask to have EPR schemes in place.
And I think I'll add to that, Anne, too. I work for a council. We're an hour and a half west of Brisbane, the capital city, and we're deemed remote for some of those stewardship programs. We can't get paint back. Tyres, we pay to remove them. And you can commute to Brisbane for work if you want to. It's a long drive, but we're remote in some of those schemes. So I don't know how the Indigenous communities and the really remote communities do it. We struggle an hour and a half from a capital city. So, any more questions? Looks like you all got an early mark for afternoon tea. Don't forget to visit the trade booths, drinks tonight. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Please thank Deepika, Danette, James and Andrea. Thank you.